If you've been told you're too soft, this video might change how you see your strength. To the ones who've been holding it all, the silence, the emotions, the logistics, this space is for you. There's a misunderstanding that happens when someone becomes calmer. People often assume calm means passive. They assume quiet means weakness. They assume gentleness means someone who can easily be walked over. But often, the opposite is true. Sometimes the calmest person in the room is the one who has done the most internal work. The one who has learned how to regulate their emotions instead of reacting to them. And that kind of strength can be very easy to misunderstand. Because we live in a culture that often equates strength with volume. Who spoke the loudest? Who defended themselves the hardest? Who won the moment? But emotional maturity usually looks very different from that. It looks like someone pausing instead of escalating. It looks like someone choosing dignity over the temporary satisfaction of proving a point. It looks like someone who understands that not every situation deserves their nervous system. There's also an important psychological distinction here. Emotional suppression and emotional regulation are not the same thing. Suppression is when you swallow your emotions to keep the peace or avoid conflict. You stay quiet because you're afraid of what will happen if you speak. Regulation is very different. Regulation is when you are fully aware of your emotions, but you choose how you express them. One is silence from fear. The other is silence from strength. And when someone moves from suppression into regulation, something interesting often happens. They become softer, but also clearer. They stop over-explaining. They stop chasing understanding from people who are committed to misunderstanding them. They stop performing distress just to prove that something matters. And sometimes the people around them feel that shift. Because when someone is used to you reacting, defending, explaining, fixing, your calm can feel unfamiliar, sometimes even threatening. People may say things like, "You've changed. You're distant now. You're not as warm as you used to be." But often what has really changed is that you are no longer carrying the emotional labor of everyone around you. You see this a lot in relationships. Often there is one person who manages the emotional climate. They initiate the conversations. They repair after arguments. They smooth over tension. They monitor whether everyone is okay. And for a long time they believe that is love. But eventually something shifts. They realize that love should not require them to constantly regulate two nervous systems. So they begin to step back, not dramatically, not angrily, but quietly. They stop chasing conversations. They stop explaining the same boundary 10 different ways. They stop performing agency when the other person has no intention of changing. And that quiet shift can look like distance. But often it is actually self-respect. There's another form of strength that often goes unnoticed. The quiet decisions people make when they realize they cannot control someone else's willingness to change. I know this from my own life. There was a conversation I eventually stopped having. Not because it didn't matter. If anything, it mattered more than almost anything. It was about the children. Not the big dramatic things people imagine when they think of conflict. Just something very simple. Be warm with them. Be someone they want to come to. Don't let them grow up feeling like they have to earn your softness. Those were the kinds of things that were said. Not once, but many times. In different ways, at different moments, trying to find the right tone, the right timing, the right words that might finally land. And eventually there was a moment of realization that was quite difficult to sit with. You cannot make someone choose connection. And that's a painful truth many parents eventually face. You cannot force someone to be the parent your children deserve. You cannot argue someone into warmth. You cannot convince someone to become emotionally available if they do not want to be. And once that became clear, something shifted. The energy that had been spent knocking on that door was no longer spent there. Instead, it was placed somewhere else, into being the warm one, the one the children could come to, the one who made home feel safe. That decision was quiet. From the outside, it probably didn't look like strength at all. There was no dramatic confrontation, no big speeches, just a calm redirection of energy. But internally, it was one of the most grounded decisions that had ever been made. Because sometimes strength is not forcing someone else to become what they refuse to be. Sometimes strength is deciding who you will be instead. Another psychological lens that helps explain this is attachment. When someone is anxious in relationships, they often feel the need to pursue, to explain more, to resolve the issue immediately, to close the emotional distance as quickly as possible. But when someone begins to develop secure attachment, something changes. They no longer panic when there's space. They trust that they can communicate clearly and then step back. They understand that their value is not determined by how convincingly they argue their position. And so they move differently. Calmer, more grounded, more selective about where they invest their emotional energy. This is where softness becomes powerful. Softness is not submission. Softness is regulation. It is someone who can hold their emotions without letting those emotions control the room. It is someone who can say, I understand what you're saying, but this doesn't work for me. Without raising their voice, without attacking, without collapsing. That kind of presence is actually very strong because it requires internal stability. It requires self-trust. It requires the ability to tolerate someone else's disappointment without abandoning yourself. Many people mistake drama for strength, but drama is often dysregulation. True strength is when someone can remain grounded even when the situation becomes emotionally charged. When they can say less, but mean it. When they can leave a conversation that is no longer productive. When they can choose peace without needing the other person to validate it first. So if someone has told you recently that you've become quieter, or calmer, or less reactive than you used to be, that may not be a loss. It may be growth. Because sometimes the strongest thing a person can do is regulate their nervous system in a world that constantly invites them to lose control. Soft doesn't mean weak. Sometimes it simply means you've learned how to hold your strength without needing to display it. To the ones who've been holding it all, you don't have to prove your strength by being loud. Sometimes strength looks like calm. Sometimes strength looks like dignity. And here, you can set some of it down.